Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Shabbos, Daf Ayin Gimel. We're 9 lines from the top, says the Gemara. Itma, we learned. Now we are continuing our discussion regarding the halacha of misasik. Misasik means preoccupation. We learned from a pasuk. The pasuk says, Asher chata ba. One must have intention, kavana, to perform this ma'isa, this act of isser, in order to be liable, in order to bring a chatas. And we exclude a case of misasik. If one is preoccupied with an activity which is unrelated to this malacha, to this isser, in that case, he is pater. This actually is the reason why we walk on the street on Shabbos without fear, without concern of perhaps stepping on a bug and killing it, because we're busy walking. We're preoccupied with the activity of walking. We have no intent or purpose in stepping on any bugs along the way. So there's no kavana, there's no intention, there is no involvement even in that type of activity. He's preoccupied with simply walking on the street. So in this case, he is pater. The Gemara will give us 2 examples, in addition to the example we had yesterday on the Ayin Beis of misasik, and actually to be machlekes, Abaye and Rava, to what extent do we apply this principle? Itma, we learned. Niskaven lizrek shtay. If one had kavana to throw an item 2 amis in Rosh Hashanah, v'zarak arba, but somehow it ended up being thrown 4 amis, which is the shiur of the malacha of Eitzah in Rosh Hashanah. So his kavana was, his intention was to do something very small, which does not have the status of a malacha of Eitzah. He was involved in a non-malacha activity. It was only a zrika of 2 amis, but it ended up flying 4 amis. Rav Amar pater. This is considered to be a misasik, because he wasn't involved in an activity which constitutes a malacha on Shabbos. Abaye Amar chayiv. He is chayiv. He's not a misasik, because he intended on throwing, and he did throw. So what if he intended on throwing merely 2 amis, and it ended up flying 4 amis? But his kavanah was to do this ma'isa, this act of zrika. Therefore, he's not a misasik. He's not preoccupied with something else entirely different. He's regarded as a shoygeg, because he had no kavanah to do the malacha. He only wanted to throw 2 amis, so he's a shoygeg, and he needs to bring a chatas. Explains the Gemara. Rav Amar pater. Why? The loike mechaven lizrika de arba, because he had no intention of doing an act of zrikas arba amis. It's regarded as an entirely different type of act, an act which is regarded as a malacha. He had kavanah merely to throw 2 amis, which is an entirely different activity. Therefore, he's a misasik. Abaye Amar chayiv. Doka mechaven lizrika ba'alma. At the end of the day, he had a kavanah to throw. That's all that counts. His machshava was to throw an item, to do a zrika, and he did throw the item. So although he intended on throwing merely 2 amis, and it ended up flying 4 amis, he's not regarded as a misasik. He is a shoygig and needs to bring a chatas. Another example of a misasik, where there will be machlokes Abaye v'Rava. Kasavar shesayachid. He figures he was throwing in Rosh Hashanah. So he mistakenly thought that he was in a private domain. V'nim says Shusarabim. It turned out that he was throwing in Rosh Hashanah. Here too, Rava says a Rav Amar pater, because his involvement was with a non-malach activity. Sure, he was throwing, he was carrying, but he figured he was doing it in Rosh Hashanah. This is a ma'isa, an activity unrelated to malacha. Therefore, he's regarded as a misasik. V'Abaye Amar chayiv. Here too, Abaye says no, he's chayiv. Explains the Gemara. Rav Amar pater the loy mechaven lizrika di surah, because he had no intention of doing a zrika, which is regarded as a malacha. He intended on throwing, sure, but it was shesayachet. V'Abaye Amar chayiv. Doka mechaven lizrika ba'alma. At the end of the day, he had a kavanah to do this physical activity, to do this ma'isa zrika. So, though halachically speaking, it is not regarded as a ma'isa which has the properties, the qualifications of malacha. Nevertheless, We don't look at the halachic side of it. We look at the practical side of it. He had a kavanah. He intended to throw something, and he did throw it, and ended up as a malacha. This is not regarded as a misasik, and therefore he's chayiv. Let's perhaps take a look at Rashi, who explains Rava's shita. This is Rashi, 16 lines from the top. The Rashi begins with the words, This is Rava speaking. Rava maintains that this is different because he had no kavana. This is different than an ordinary shaygig, because he had no kavana to do a zrika of isser, a zrika which is regarded as a malacha. He simply intended on throwing 2 ames or throwing an Rosh Hashanah. So it's different than a case where one intends on doing the Maisa, which is regarded as a malacha, but he was a shaygig. For instance, Rashi says, "V'hei shaygig b'Shabbos, oy b'malacha." So he intended on doing this specific act, which is considered to be a Maisa malacha, but the inadvertence, the shgaga, related to Shabbos. He was unaware today is Shabbos. Oy b'malacha. He was unaware that this is regarded as a malacha of Isser. So that's ordinarily speaking. That's your typical shgaga. Aval zeh, but in our case, ein li shaygig, loy b'Shabbos, v'loy b'malachis. He isn't the person who's unaware that today is Shabbos or that this is a malacha. Ela misasik b'davar echad shel heter. Rather, he's a fellow who is being busy now with something which is mutter. He's throwing something 2 ames. He's throwing something Rosh Hashanah. V'also b'yad isser. And it somehow resulted in an isser. He is regarded as a misasik, and therefore is not a shaygig, and no chatas is required. So these 2 cases of Abai v'Rava is an addition. These 2 cases are in addition to the initial machlekes we had in Daf Ayin Beis, with the case of an example where a person had the intention to be chaytich, an item which is talish, to cut a tomato which was already off the ground. So you intended on cutting, but cutting what? Something which was already detached. Rava says he's a masasik. He's involved in a non-malacha activity. It's unrelated to malacha, because halachically speaking, this ma'aseh that he intends on performing doesn't really configure as a ma'aseh malacha. It doesn't have the nature of a ma'aseh malacha, and therefore it's considered as though he's preoccupied with something else, and he's potter. According to Abaye, at the end of the day, he had a kavanah to cut, to do a maaseh chaticha, and he indeed did cut. So although his kavanah was to cut something which was talish, which was detached, and he ended up cutting something off the ground, something mechubar, it's regarded as a shgaga, not as a misasik, because apparently according to Abaye, we look at the practical side of things. He intended on cutting, and he did cut. Therefore, it's not a misasik. According to Rava, we focus more on the halachic aspect of things. He intended on being involved in something which doesn't conform, halachically speaking, to an act of malacha. Therefore, he's a misasik. So you have a total of 3 examples. We have this case, and we have the other 2 cases that we just discussed about the zrika. Says the Gemara, why do we have to have all 3 cases to present the machlekes Abai v'Rava? The tzricha says, well, we need them all. Each one has a chiddush. The ashminik hamaisa, because if we would only know the first case, the case of the cutting, bahu kama Rava, perhaps over there, I would think that Rava holds that's called a misasik. Why? Because he had no intention on doing a chaticha, a cutting of malacha, of isser. He simply intended on cutting something off the ground, something which was already talish. Therefore, it's a misasik. Aval niskaven lizark shtayim v'zarak arba. However, in our case, we intended on throwing an item, a chayfetz, 2 ames in Rosh Hashanah, and he ended up throwing 4 ames. Perhaps over there I would think there's a difference. There's a difference between the first case. Over here, perhaps it's not a misasik. Why? Explains the Gemara. The arba below tarti loy mizrukalei. Within the number 4 is included the number 2. So when he ended up throwing 4 ames, included in that zrika of dalad ames is certainly a zrika of 2 ames. So his machshava, his intention, his plan was indeed fulfilled. It was niskayim machshavtei. It was nasis machshavtei. when it ended up flying 4 amas, his plan was fulfilled. Perhaps over here, Rava would agree to Abaye that this is not regarded as a misasik. He ended up fulfilling his initial plan. Perhaps in this case, he's chayiv. Therefore, we need to learn, that even in this case, Rava disagrees. He holds it's called a misasik. V'yashmina baha. Now, if the Gemara would simply tell us this case, I would say, first and second case, and not the third case of the Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, perhaps I would find a distinction in chiluk. I would say as follows: V'yashmina baha. So if we would only have this case of the zrika of 2 and 4 amas, but not the other case of the Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah, b'ho kama Rava, perhaps I would think that in this case, indeed Rava maintains it's a mesasik, the halakha mechaven l'zrika de arba, because he intended on throwing merely 2 amas. He had no machshava, no plan of throwing a zrika of 4 amas. So the 4 amas zrika, this entity called a 4 amas zrika, was totally beyond him. Therefore, it's regarded as a mesasik. It wasn't what he was involved in. But in the case where he's throwing 4 amas, he's doing this 4 amas zrika, but he thinks he's in Rosh Hashanah, and that's mutter. So in his mind, he's throwing 4 amas in Rosh Hashanah. It turns out that he was actually in Rosh Hashanah. Perhaps in this case, the mechaven lezrika de arba, since even in his mind, what was he trying to do? He was trying to do this type of activity, this type of maisa of a zrika of arba amas. Okay, he thought it was Rosh Hashanah and being Rosh Hashanah. That's a side detail. Perhaps in this case, Rabbi would agree to Abaye that yes, we regard his involvement as a full involvement in this malacha. It's not like he was involved in something else. He was misasek, preoccupied with a activity which was totally unrelated to the malacha. No, he was involved in this form of maisa, in the maisa of zrika of Daled Amos. Okay, so he mistook the Rosh Hashanah for Shesayach. Perhaps that's a shaygig. Perhaps in this case, Rav agrees to Abaye that it's a shaygig tzricha. The Gemara needs to inform us, no, that machlokes is in all 3 cases. So in summary, we have 3 cases. That there is a machlokes between Abaye and Rava. Abaye regards them as shaygig. Rava says misasik. We have number 1, niskaven lachtich tolish. He intended on cutting something which was detached, and he ended up cutting something off the ground. We have the case where he intended on throwing something 2 amas in Rosh Hashanah, and he ended up throwing 4. And finally, the case where he intended on throwing 4 amas in Rosh Hashanah, and he ended up really throwing it in Rosh Hashanah. Continues the Gemara Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Avos malachis arboim chasar achas. So this is the Mishnah coming up very soon. We have a total of 39 avos malachis arboim chasar achas, 40 minus 1. Now, the obvious question is, why does the Mishnah need to present us with a number? Let's take a look at the Mishnah. We'll see the 39. Why does the Mishnah need to cite the number? What is the point of giving us the minyan, the number? The Mishnah here is indicating something to us. If a person were to perform all those activities, all those malachas, in one helim, in one lapse of awareness, in one uninterrupted period of forgetfulness, of unawareness. So he did malacha after malacha after malacha until he got to 39, and only then afterwards realized, 1 second, I'm doing malachas, I'm doing yisurim. So all of them will perform together. Chayav al kol achas v'achas. He will bring a carbon for each one separately. Why? Because we know that when a person is aware of Shabbos, he knows today is Shabbos, but is unaware that these are regarded as malachas. In that case, the shkaga, the unawareness, is separated, is applied to each malacha independently, and requires a separate chatas. Says the Gemara, how can we find a situation where a person is totally unaware of all those 39 malachas? Nevertheless, he knows that today is Shabbos. If he doesn't know that these are malachas, he doesn't know that Shabbos entails any malachas, any yisurim, why in his mind is it Shabbos? In what way is Shabbos different than Friday? So how can we say that this person is aware of Shabbos, of the significance of Shabbos? Shabbos carries weight to him, but nonetheless he's unaware of any malachis. So let's explore this. It's all well according to Abaye, the Omar ki ha'gavnu chayiv, who says that in a case where a person intended on doing a small portion of a malacha, for instance, throwing 2 amas instead of 4, so the shear is 4 amas, but his machshava was to only throw 2 amas. Abai maintains, in this case, it is shaygig and he's chayiv. He needs to bring a chatas. So according to Abaye, we can understand the halacha in this Mishnah, the halacha of the 39 malachas. It's all well and understood according to Abaye, who says that if one intended on doing a partial malacha and subsequently did the full malacha, he is chayiv. It's regarded as a shaygig and not as a masasik. Mishkachasla, we can apply this concept, this halacha of the Mishnah, the liability to all 39. Mishkachasla the yada the isura. He knows about the isura the Shabbos. V'yadala isur malachis. V'katav b'shiurin. This fellow is fully aware of the fact that today is Shabbos. He knows that Shabbos entails many Yisurim. There are many malachis involved in Shabbos. So he's fully aware. So why then is he a shaygig? Why do we say that he did all these 39 malachis? He's a shaygig on all of them. He needs to bring 39 karbanis. In what way is he a shaygig if he's fully aware of Shabbos and the malachis? V'katav b'shiurin. His mistake simply was regarding shear, regarding the measure, regarding the amount, meaning he intended on throwing 2 amas, and somehow he ended up throwing 4 amas. So he knew the facts. He was aware of Shabbos. He knows that carrying or throwing is an isser. He also knows that the melacha of Eitzah involves 4 amas. So he intended on merely doing 2 amas, and somehow he ended up doing 4 amas. In this case, he's a shaygig, and he brings a korban. So this concept can be applied to all 39 malachis. He knows Shabbos, he knows those malachis, and he intended on doing only the partial malacha, which according to Abaye results in a chiyuv chatas. So once again, according to Abaye, we can present the halacha of this Mishnah in very clear terms. He knows that it's Shabbos. He's aware of the significance of these malachis. He actually knows the details, the halachic framework of those malachis. And he doesn't intend on doing the shear. He intends on doing part of the shear, part of the malacha. Therefore, he's a shaygig. He needs to bring a chatas. So if he does this, if this applies to all 39 malachis, behelam echad, this results in 39 chiyuvim. Ela l'Rav the Amar Pata. However, according to Rav, who holds that if one intended on only doing a partial malacha, and somehow it resulted in him doing the full malacha, he's regarded as a misasik. He's preoccupied. He was involved in a non-malach activity. It's not a shaygig. There's no chatas here. If so, hey chimesh kachas lo. How could you find me a case where a person will perform all 39 malachis behelim echad in a lapse of awareness, mishgaga, unaware, and needs to bring 39 karbanis? How's it possible according to Rav? Says b'shigigas bezadin Shabbos. Apparently, it is bezadin Shabbos. He's deliberate regarding Shabbos. He knows, he's aware of the concept of Shabbos, that today is Shabbos. V'shigeres malachis, but unaware regarding the malachis. Only in that case can this person be liable to 39 chatayis, 39 separate chiyuvim for the 39 separate shgagas. But how can we find the situation according to Rava, where a person is unaware of all the malachas, but is still aware of Shabbos? If he's unaware of the malachas, then that means that equals unawareness about Shabbos, because in what way is Shabbos significant to him? So how can we find a situation according to Rava? Because once again, Rava maintains that if one were to have a kavanah, intention to do a partial malacha, and it resulted in doing a full malacha, he's regarded as a misasik. So we can't say that is the example, that is the case of the Mishnah there. Therefore, let's find a case where, according to Rava, we can have a situation where a person will be chayiv 39 malachis. How's that possible? Says Mahanicha Isav Lakrav Yochanan. So it works well if he follows Shitas of Yochanan, who tells us what are the parameters of a shogeg. What does it mean when we say a person is a shogeg, he's unaware? To what extent does he need to be unaware? Says the Gemara, if we follow Rav Yochanan who tells us the Amar, Kivan sheshogag bekaris, afal pi shehezed belav, that if a person is unaware of the severity, he's unaware of the karis penalty associated with an avera, that is already regarded as a shogeg. Even though afal pi shehezed belav, even if he's fully aware of the isser of the lav, which prohibits doing this avera, since he's unaware of the severity, to what extent this avera carries a penalty of karis, he's regarded as a shogeg. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, if we follow Rav Yochanan Shita, then we can understand this halacha, mishkachasla. We can find the case, the yodalo the Shabbos belav. How is he aware about Shabbos, but unaware of the malachis? Because he's unaware of the fact that those malachis entail a oynish of karis. That is sufficient to deem him a shogeg. And he will bring 39 chatois if he did all those 39 malachis be'elam echad. In what way is he regarded as a hazed b'Shabbos, deliberate and aware about Shabbos? The yodel Shabbos belav, because he's aware about the significance of Shabbos with relation to the lav involved in those malachas. So he's fully aware of Shabbos. He's fully aware that on Shabbos those malachas are asur. He thinks they're merely a lav. So he's being measured regarding Shabbos. But since he's unaware of the karis entailed in those malachas, he's regarded as a shogeg as it pertains to those malachas. So once again, we have a great example, a scenario where a person can perform all those malachas b'shgaga. Nevertheless, we regard him as a mezid regarding Shabbos and a shogeg regarding those malachas. So this will work well even according to Rava. He knows about Shabbos, he knows the lav, and he goes ahead and intends on throwing this item 4 amas Rosh Hashanah. Why is it a shgaga? Because he's unaware of the significance, the full severity and weight of what he's doing. He doesn't realize there's kares involved. Therefore, it's a shogeg. Says the Gemara, okay, this works well if we follow Rav Yochanan's view, interpretation of shogeg. Ela isav alakev Shem Malakish. But if he follows, if Rava follows the view, the shita, the opinion of Shem Malakish, the Amar who says, Ashe yishgog belav kares, that we only deem a person to be a shogeg, a person who's unaware, if he's fully unaware. He doesn't know that there's a kares involved in the avera, nor does he know that there's even a lav associated with this avera. At that point, he's regarded as a shogeg. So if that's the case, how are we going to understand the halach in this Mishnah of the 39 malachis? The yodel l'Shabbos b'may. So if he's unaware of the fact that these malachas are even asur, so in what way is he aware of the significance of Shabbos? If Shabbos entails no malachis, no yisurim, then in his mind Shabbos is an ordinary weekday. So how do we find a case where he is mazed on Shabbos and shogeg and all those malachis, according to Rav and according to Shem Malakish? Says the Gemara, very simple. There's another issa called tchumen, not allowing a person to leave his boundaries past 2,000 amis. Now according to Rav Akiva, this is asur min Torah. Says the Gemara, this will be a solution. How to establish the Mishnah in accordance with Rava and Rav Shem Malakish. Why? Because once again, Rava maintains that a shogeg is only if he intends on doing this form of activity. For instance, to throw the item 4 amas Rosh Hashanah. Now, according to Rava, evidently, since he's involved in doing this activity, we can't say that, well, he only intended on doing part of the activity. That's a misasik. So what is the case of shogeg? He intended on doing this activity, but he was unaware of the severity. He was unaware of the isser. According to Shem Malakish, he was totally unaware that's asur. Not only doesn't he know about the kares, he doesn't even know that there's a lav involved. So he's fully unaware of the isser associated with all 39 malachis. He did all 39 be'elam echad with the same unawareness, in the same continuous, uninterrupted period of shgaga. Now, why does he bring 39 chatois? Because these are 39 separate shgagas. Because this person is aware of Shabbos. There's no shigigas Shabbos here to bind them, to combine them together. There's no singular unawareness. He knows about Shabbos. He simply doesn't know about these individual 39 malachis. Says the Gemara, 1 second. But if he's unaware of malachis, in what way is Shabbos significant in his mind? Says the Gemara, we have a solution. Tchumen. He knows that there's a tchumen on Shabbos. So this isn't one of the 39 malachis. This is an isser, which according to Rav Kiva is isser HaTorah. So he knows about that, and therefore in his mind, Shabbos has significance. There's an isser of tchumen. So at the end of the day, he's amazed on Shabbos. He's deliberate regarding Shabbos. He's aware of the fact that today is Shabbos. He knows what Shabbos is. In his mind, there's an isser of tchumen on Shabbos, and that is the significance of Shabbos. So in this case, even according to Rava, even according to Shimon Lakish, if he performed all those 39 malachis, behel echad, with one lapse, bishgaga, he will bring 39 chatois, one per malach. Continues the Mishnah. Avos malachis arbaim chasarachas. How many avos malachis are there? 39 categories of malachis. So the concept of avos malachis is based on the fact that these various labors were performed in the Mishkan, in the construction of the Mishkan, in making of the Mishkan. And we learn this from the Pasuk, the fact that the Pasuk joins together the concept of Shabbos right next to the concept of Mishkan. This is the beginning of Parshas Vayakel. We learn from there that the malachos of Shabbos are derived from the Mishkan. So once again, avos malachos, how many avos categories of malachos are there? When we say avos, of course, these are merely the avos, the fathers, the main categories, but there are teilades, there are derivatives, which we learned in Daf Ayin Amud Beis, that we learned this from the pasuk of Mehena. Hena is referring to the avos. The word Mehena is coming to teach us that there's such a thing called toldes, something which is derived, which resembles the av malacha. That too is asur on Shabbos. The Mishnah will list us all 39 avos malachas. Now, why does the Mishnah use the term arbaim chasarachas? I saw several explanations. There's a pirush from the Taisus Yantav who says as follows, that one of the malachas here is toifer, sewing. The Gemara later will tell us on Daf Ayin Daled that in order to be considered a malacha of toifer, he needs to actually, when he finishes sewing, he needs to actually tie together those loose ends of the threads. Otherwise, it's going to come apart. It's going to unravel. So, in order for it to be considered a malacha, he needs to do actually two malachas, toifer and kosher. Says the Taisus Yantav, if so, in reality, in order for him to do all malachas, he needs to do 40, because toifer includes toifer and kosher. Nevertheless, he will only be chayev 39, because if he does all 40, he's actually doing kosher twice. So the end result will be really 39 chiyuvim. So he says that's the pshat in the Mishnah, arbaim chasarachas. Although he really did 40, but the liability only will be for 39. That's one of the pshatim. There are other pshatim, the Kabbalah, many pshatim and Farshim bring. This is one of the pshatim. So avos malacha is arbaim chasarachas. So let's see. What are the 39? As Rashi will explain, they were all found in the Mishkan in various forms. Hazoreya, sowing seeds. So the first bunch of malachas here, of Hazoreya and Chayrish, etc., Rashi explains, were used in the Mishkan to develop the samamonim, those plants, those herbs used for the dyeing, the coloring process, where they need to dye the material, the wool, etc. So all these malachas here related to the beginning of the Mishnah, the first category, were used for the samamonim in the Mishkan. Hazoreya, planting, v'achorish, plowing, v'akoitzer, harvesting, v'ma'amer, gathering together the produce, v'hadash, threshing, v'azoyer, winnowing, haboirer, selecting, picking out the waste, the psoilus, for instance, the pebbles out of the grains, v'hatoichen, grinding, v'maraked, sifting, v'halosh, kneading, v'oifa, and baking. Now, as Rashi explains, that actually oifa, baking, was not involved in there was no baking involved in the construction of the Mishkan. It was actually mavashal, cooking those samamonim for the dye. Nevertheless, Rashi brings the Gemara that the Tana chose to use the term oifa, which relates, lashon oifa relate to a dough of a bread, which is more common than cooking the samamonim. Therefore, the Mishnah chose to use terms which relate to common everyday affairs. Therefore, the Mishnah chose to use oifa rather than mevashel. So this first list of malachos were involved in developing this samamanim, the planting, the plowing, etc. Continues the Mishnah with another category. These were employed in making the wool for the curtains, for the sheets, for the materials for the Mishkan. Hagoyed is at summer, one who shears wool. Hamlabnoi, he cleans it, he washes it. Vamenapzoi, he combs it. Hatsoiva, he dyes it. Vatoiva, he spins those threads. So these were involved in producing the tzemer, the wool for the Mishkan. Continues the Mishnah with another category of malachos which were involved in weaving, in producing the yiriyos, those curtains, those materials used in the Mishkan. V'hamesech, he goes and he spreads the vertical threads up on the loom. V'oisesh debatanir, and he places the vertical threads, two of them, through these loops. So there were these loops where the vertical threads were pulled through, which would enable the threads to be lifted, and the chutei erev, the horizontal threads, to be tossed through it. He's setting up the weaving process. So he puts two threads through these loops. He actually weaves two threads. Rashi explains this to mean that sometimes the thread was too thick and unsuitable for the weaving, so they would actually pull out some fibers of those threads to enable them to be woven properly. So he does this regarding two chutim. He's peitzea two chutim. HaKosher v'hamater. He ties or unties. The Gemara will explain where exactly were these malachas employed in the Mishkan. V'hatoifer shtei tfiros. If one sews two stitches. HaKoreya, or he rips, he tears. Almanas litvar shtei tfiros. He doesn't merely rip for the sake of ripping. He tears to enable him to actually repair something, to go ahead and make two stitches. So these again were employed in the yiriyos, the curtains used in the Mishkan. Comes the next category, hatzot tzvi. He captures a deer. Hasheichtai, he slaughters it. Vamafshita, he skins it, pulls off the hide. So these were employed in the making of the oiros techashim, the hide of this tachash animal used to cover the Mishkan. So these are malachos that pertain to developing these hides, these leathers. So he's sheichet et tzvi, hamafshitoi, he skins it. Hamalchai, he salts it. This is the part of the process, the tanning process of amabedis oira. He tans it. So he tans the oir, the leather. V'amamachkai, he smooths it out by removing the hair. V'amachatchai, he cuts it down to size. Continues the Mishnah. If one writes two letters, or he erases two letters, so he erases in order to go ahead and write in its place another two letters. Rashi explains these malachas were used in order to make a simon, to make a mark on the krushim, on those beams used in the Mishkan, in order to know which one belonged next to the other. Therefore, they used these oisis, these letters. So this was a malacha employed in the Mishkan. Ha-boina, he builds. Va-soicher, dismantles. Certainly, this is Mishkan related. Ha-machabe, he puts out a fire. Va-maver, or he kindles a fire. Once again, this was used to cook those samimanim. Ha-makabe patish. So the word makabe patish literally means the blow of the hammer. So Rashi explains that, for instance, the craftsman, when he would go ahead and flatten out the gold, make them into plates, he would use this hammer, and he would want to make sure that the bottom of the hammer is totally flat and smooth. Otherwise, it would damage the gold. So when he was done, he would go ahead and take the hammer and effect a blow on the sada, on this block of wood, in order to smooth out the hammer. So this was the finishing, the last activity done when he was done his craft. So this is a term used for any maisa, any finishing touch on a melacha. So makabe patish, hamoitzi mishus rishus, one who carries from one rishus to the other, for instance from rishus yachad to rishus rabim. Hare'elu, so in total we have avos malachis, Father categories of malachos are arba'im chasu achas, a total of 39. Let's take a look at the 39 malachos. So the Mishnah began with the malacha of Zereya planting and listed 11 malachos from Zereya through Oifa, which were associated in producing the samamonim, those dyes used to color the materials in the Mishkan. We proceeded with another 5 malachos from Goizes and Satzemer through the Toiva, which is the spinning, used to produce the tzemer, the wool, for the Mishkan. We have 8 malachos from Mesach through Toifer, which were involved in producing the Yiriyos, the curtains of the Mishkan. We have from Tzeda to Mechatech, 7 malachos involved in developing the Oirois of the Tchashim, the hides of the Tachash. We have the Kaisev and the Meichik, which are used to mark the Krashim, to indicate their location. We have Boine and Seiser, and we have Mechabe and Mavir for the fire to cook the Samamonim. We have Makebe Patish, the final touch of the Malacha. We have Moitzim Mishus Lashus, carrying of the Krashim, since they were transported in this manner. Continues the Gemara. Minyan Alamli. Why does the Mishnah need to give us a number 39 malachos? It's self-evident. Just take a look at how many malachos there are. Why does the Mishnah see it need to give us the number? Amar Rav Yochanan, there's an indication here. There's a siman here. Shim asan kulam be'elam echad. If he was to do all those malachos, all the 39 within one hell and one period of forgetfulness, of unawareness, chayav aklachas va'achas. He needs to be 39 chatois, because he did it with the Zodin Shabbos. He was aware of Shabbos. But the Shgaga pertained to the individual malachos, and this results in individual liabilities, 39 chatois. Continues the Gemara, Zereya v'achirish. The Mishnah first lists Zereya, sowing, planting the seeds, and then afterwards, plowing. Now which one's meant to go first? Michdi, let's take a look. Mikrav karbi bereisha. First one plows to enable the planting. So why does the Mishnah switch things around? Listening chayrish, v'ada listening zareya. The Mishnah should first list chayrish, plowing, and only then v'ada listening zareya, only then the sowing. Says the Gemara, Tana Beretz Yisrael Koi, Tana is in Eretz Yisrael, and over there, the Zari Bereisha, first they plant v'ada karbi, and afterwards they plow. As Rashi explains, the earth is stiff, it's hard. And as Mepharshim explained, they did 2 charishos. They did that initial plowing to loosen up the earth. Then they would throw the seeds in and do another charisha, another plowing in order to cover over the seeds. And this was necessary in Yisrael. And the Tana is teaching us here that even that second charisha, which is coming primarily to cover over those seeds, is still regarded as a malacha of charisha. The point of charisha is loosening the earth, as we'll see later in the Gemara. So that even though over here the primary intent is to cover over the seeds, nevertheless this is regarded as a charisha. Continues the Gemara. Tana, we learned in the Brisa. The first malacha in the Mishnah is Hazareya. Says the Brisa, you should know that within this first malacha of Hazareya, this is a category which contains within it several variations, several different forms of planting, sowing, spurring growth. These are all regarded as Zereya. Tana, we learned in the Brisa. Hazareya, one who actually plants seeds, v'hazoymer, or he prunes a tree. This is also necessary to spur the growth of the tree, to develop the tree. V'haniteya, he plants a sapling, a tree. V'hamavrich, or he bends one of the branches of the tree into the ground for it to take root and come up elsewhere as a separate tree. That's also a form of planting. V'hamarkiv, or he grafts. He takes a branch from another tree, puts it into this tree. This is a form of developing growth. Kulan melacha achasen. They were all regarded as one malacha. They all fall into the category of Zereya. Says my kamashmon. What's the point of the Brisa here? How kamashmon? The Brisa is teaching us a halachic fact. Since all these things are regarded as Zereya, therefore oisa malacha is harbi. Mei malacha achas and echai malachas. The Brisa is teaching us this halacha. Ha oisa malacha is harbi. If one should perform many malachas, mei malacha achas, who all fall into the same category, they all resemble one malacha. What is the result? Ein echai malachas. He only brings one chatas, because all these malachas are regarded as one and the same. So if he does them all behelam echad, of course, within one period of forgetfulness, he only brings one carbon. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi here is at 6 lines from the top, beginning of the words Kular malacha achasen. Says Rashi, the zoymer nami. Not only is sowing, planting considered to be Zereya, even Zomer, pruning a tree, is also included in this concept. Why? Because the Zomer Nabi, Litzmuchi Lano. It's there to spur the growth, to benefit the development of the tree. Therefore, it is also included in this category. V'nafkamin. What is the halachic ramification of this discussion? The Avad Lekulan, Badi Zereya. If he is Zereya, right, he plants, sows some seeds, and he does them all together with Zereya. He's Zomer, he's Markiv, he's Mavrich. He's only liable to one chatas. Why? If one performs many malachas which fall into the same category, the same av malacha, it's only one liability. Explains Rashi. Zerei av malacha. Zerei is regarded as an av malacha. V'neiteya nami av malacha. So is neiteya. Dahin is zereya. He is planting. Ella rather shezeh b'izroim. The term zereya is a reference to Zerayim. So within this first category, within this first malacha of zereya, there are various manifestations, there are various references. The word zereya references planting seeds. The word neiteya is a reference to planting a tree, but they all fall into the same category. They all regarded the same av malacha. Once again, it says Rashi, "V'neiteya nami av malacha." Dahin is zereya. Ela shezeh b'zroim. The word zereya, the term zereya, is a reference to seeds. V'zeh b'lam is the term neiteya, references trees. V'chei mavrich, the planting, bending the branch into the ground. So they used to take a branch from an existing tree and simply bend it into the ground to take root. So this is a form of planting. Umarkiv and grafting. Aval, says Rashi, Zomer, you should know that Zomer, pruning, is a teloda. It's not an av, it's a teloda. It's a derivative of this av malach. So once again, the Bryce is teaching us that all these forms of planting, enhancing growth, all regarded as the same av malach. Continues the Gemara. Omar of Acha, Omar of Chia bar Ashi, Omar of Ami. Zomer, pruning a tree, chayev mishum neteya. If one does so, he is chayev on account of what? On account of the malacha of neteya. Because once again, the zomer enhances, spurs the growth of the tree. V'neteya. If one plants a tree, v'amavrich, he bends that branch into the ground, v'amarkiv, grafts, chayev mishum zereya, he's chayev on account of the malacha of zereya. Says the Gemara, zereya? Mishum zereya in? Mishum neteya loy? This is this mavrich, this markiv is regarded as zereya and not as neteya. Don't we know that anything involving a tree is zereya, is neteya? So why do you say that it's zereya, not neteya? Says the Gemara, ema af mishum zereya. What he meant to say was like this: that these are regarded certainly as neteya because they're spurring the growth of a tree, but don't think that neteya and zereya are separate. Don't think that mavrich and markiv are regarded simply as neiteya and no relation to zereya. No, they all fall together into one category. And for instance, if one does zriya, he plants some seeds and also performs these activities on the tree, he's markiv, he's mavrich, he's only chayav one chatas because they're all in the same category as we mentioned earlier. Omar Khan, zomer v'tzarach leitzin. What happens if one prunes a tree? So the point again of zomer is to be matzmiach, to help spur the growth of the tree. But this person has a double purpose, a double intention. He's zomer, he's pruning the tree, but he also is v'tzarach leitzim. He needs these branches. Chayiv shtayim. He has to bring two chatois. Why? Achas mishum kaitzer. One, because of the malach of kaitzer, he's harvesting. He's using these branches. He's cutting them off for his own sake, for personal use. That is kaitzer. Va'achas mishum neiteya. And the other chata is because of neiteya, because he's spurring the growth of the tree, of the vine. Rav Yosef, Haiman the katal aspasta. If one is to cut this plant, aspasta plant, used for animal feed, so Rashi explains they used to cut it 3 times in the same month. So every time they cut it, that would spur its growth, and they would have to cut it again the second time. So 3 times within a month. So the point here is that the cutting has a double purpose. Number one, it's useful. He uses the whatever he's cutting off for the animal, and number 2, he's spurring the growth. He's enabling the further growth of this plant. So once again, here as well is chayiv 2. Hayman the katal aspasta chayiv shtayim. Achas rishim kaitzer because he's harvesting. V'achas rishim neiteya because he's developing the plant. Amr Abaye, another case, Haiman the kind of silka. If one cuts off the silka, he cuts the beets off the ground, Chayiv Shtayim is Chayiv 2. Why? Because when he cuts it, that spurs its growth and enables it to grow again. So he's doing two things. Achas Rishum Kaitzer, he's harvesting. Achas Rishum Neitea or Zereya, he's enhancing the growth, he's spurring further growth, and therefore there are two liabilities involved. Continues the Gemara about Achirish. Tana, we learned in the Bryce. Achirish, plowing, V'achayfer, digging, V'achiritz, making a furrow, Kulo Malacha, Achas, saying, all regarded as the same Malacha. The point of the Malacha, the underlying principle of the Malacha of Chirish, is loosening the ground, as Rashi says, the Marpi Ara, he's loosening the ground. That is regarded as Chirish. So whichever form he does it, Charisha, Chafira, Charitza, it's all the same thing. Amr of Shishis. Gav Shushis, V'notla. What if a person has this little, Gav Shushis is a little pile of earth, and he flattens it out, he removes this pile. What is he chayiv? So it depends. Bebayis. If this was in his own home, chayiv mishum baina. He's doing a malach of baina because he's fixing up the home. Besada, if it's in the field, chayiv mishum chayrish. The malacha here is chayrish. Why? Because he's enabling the earth for zriya, for planting. He's loosening the earth. Amar Rabba, ha'yisalei guma v'tamama. What if a person had a pit and fills it up? Once again, it depends where it is. Bebayis, if it's in his home, chayiv mishum baina. Besada, if it's in the field, mishum chayrish. Because he's enabling this for planting, he's loosening, he's filling it up with loose earth, or as Rashi says, he's straightening out the field. So he's enabling Zriya, he's doing a malach of charisha. Omar Abba, ha'chayfa guma b'Shabbos. What about the following case? A person digs a pit, a guma. His purpose here is, his intention is strictly for the use of the earth. He has no point and purpose in digging this hole. He simply needs to have this earth. Pater aleh, he's pater. Why? Says the Gemara, even according to Rabbi Shita, Rabbi Yehuda, who holds, malacha she'ena l'tzricha l'gufa, chayiv aleh. If one does a malach which is not needed for its own sake, there's an ulterior motive here. He's using it as a means to achieve another goal. He doesn't need the actual malach itself. For instance, like this case, where he's digging a hole not for the sake of digging the hole, but merely to extract this earth. It's a malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa. It's not needed for its own purpose, its own sake. He's not achieving a higher design here. He's not developing something through the malacha. He's merely using the malacha as a means to derive a indirect pleasure, indirect benefit. So Yivikon to Yehuda holds that ordinarily speaking, he is chayiv in such a scenario. In this case, he's pot. Why? Rav Yehuda holds that malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa is chayiv. That's only when he's being masakin. He's developing something. He's being masakin. He's fixing something. He's achieving something. He's designing something. In this case, he's simply destroying. He's ruining something. He's making a hole in the ground. Therefore, since he's doing it for the sake of the offer, he's simply doing it to extract the earth, and this results in a kilkel in the ground. It's merely damaging, ruining the ground there. It's a makalkel, and it is potter. Continues the more about koitzer. You want to harvest. Tana, we learned in the Brisa. Ha-koitzer, it doesn't matter what type of thing he's harvesting or cutting off the ground, whether it's koitzer. This is generally referenced in regard to grains. Ha-boitzer, he picks the grapes. Va-ha-goider, that is the dates. Va-ha-mesik, he picks the olives, the oira, the dates. These are all different terms in reference to different types of harvesting. Kulo malacha achas. They're all regarded as the same malacha of koitzer. Omar Papa, Haiman the Shoda, a person tosses pisa, a glob of earth, ladikla up to the palm tree, va'atar tamri, and he shared some dates. So he knocked down some dates off the palm tree, chayiv shtayim, he's chayiv 2. Why? He did 2 malachas, achas mishum toilish. Number 1, he shared the dates off the tree, he's toilish. He picked something off the ground. This is a derivative of tilad of koitzer. So this is one liability. Va'achas mishum mefarik. Mefarik means loosening, extracting something from its encasement, and this is a talada of the malacha of dash, of threshing, where the grains are extracted from their shells, from their husks. So this fellow who took this glob, tossed it up on the tree, knocked off some dates. He did toilish, and he also did mefarik, because he extracted those dates from the Rashi says the branches of that hold on to the dates are called machbedis, and when he extracts the dates from those encasements, it's called a malacha, regarded as a malacha of mefarik, which is a talada of dash. Rav Ashi Omar, no, he's not chayiv in this case. This is a pretty weird way of picking dates off a tree. Ein derech lisha b'kach. This is not the typical, ordinary, acceptable manner of harvesting, of picking something off the ground. Vein derech prika b'kach. Nor is it the ordinary derech of extracting something from its encasement. It's called klachayad. It's an indirect malacha. It's not considered to be a malacha on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara Ma'amer. If one gathers, he gathers the grains. Amar Rava Haiman de Konef Milcha. If a person gathers salt, mimal chata, this was these ponds, these ditches of seawater, where the water would evaporate and leave some salt deposits behind. So he goes out to this malchasa, this salt deposit, and gathers some salt. Chayav mishum ma'amer, he's chayav on account of the malacha ma'amer, he's gathering. Abaye Amar, no, ein imur el begudel karka. The malacha of imur only applies to something which is organic, something grows from the ground, as opposed to salt, which is not gudul karka, and therefore there's no malacha ma'amer that pertains to it. Continues more about dash, he threshes. Tana, we're going to the Brisa. There are various forms of disha, various variations. Hadash, he threshes the grains. V'amenapetz, he beats the flax to get to separate the fibers from its stalks. V'amenapet, a similar concept when he beats the cotton to extract it from its encasement. These are all various forms of dash. Kula malacha achasein, they regarded as the same malacha of disha. So in summary, we learned several concepts with relation to several of malachas. We learned that the first malacha of zirei planting actually encompasses many forms of planting. Zirei seeds, zoimer, pruning, noiteya, a tree, marvrich, bending that branch into the ground to take root, or markiv, grafting. The Gemara told us if one is koitzer shachas or choitech troden, so he chops these things off the ground which spur further growth, he is chayiv mishum zareya because it is spurring further growth. We're going to about charisha. The concept of charisha is to loosen the ground. Whether he's chayfer, whether he's digging, plowing, chayritz, he makes a furrow. The Gemara told us if one removes a mound of earth or fills a pit in a sudden field, he's enabling it for proper planting and growth. That is also regarded as chayrish. We learned that the malach of koitzer, harvesting, applies to grains, boitzer, by olives, goider, by tmarim, meisik, by zaysim, or oirer, by te'enim. They're all the same malach. Dash, threshing of grain, the malach applies to manapits, to beating the flax, or to benapit, beating the cotton. They're all based on the same common principle of extracting something from its encasement. Okay, time for a brief chazara of today's daf. We began with 3 examples of misasik, which according to Rava are regarded as a misasik and not as a shogeg. According to Abaye, they are regarded as a shogeg. We have the example of a person who intends on cutting something detached, and he ended up cutting something bin amachuber. We have the case where a person intended on throwing 2 amas in Rosh Hashanah. He ended up throwing 4 amas. Finally, the case where a person intended on throwing 4 amas in Rosh Hashanah, and it really ended up being in Rosh Hashanah. According to Abaye, these are shgagos, and he needs to bring a chatos. According to Rava, he was preoccupied with a non-malach activity, and he's pater. We proceeded with the mission of the 39 Avos Malachis. We have the malachis which pertain to developing the samamonim for the dyeing of the materials, the malachas which pertain to developing the wool, pertaining to the urias, to developing the hides of the tachash. We have the malacha of kaisev and moichik pertaining to the krushim. We have boinav soiser to the mishkan. We have machabe and maver, the fire which was used to cook the samamonim. We have the makabe patish, and we have haitzah rishus rishus, which was employed in transporting the krushim. The Gemara told us the concept of zireya is planting, enhancing growth, spurring growth, and there are several variations of zireya. We learned that chayrish means loosening the earth, enabling it for planting, There are several variations of chayrish. We learned that kaitzer pertains to grains, to all different types of fruits equally. They're all regarded as the melacha of kaitzer. We learned that dash, extraction from its encasement, also has several varieties.